that it is cycling, but it always contains 2 pi. I'm referring to the form of action, a la Planck, is represented by 2 pi. You can take out the 2 pi. That shows there must have been a 2 pi in it. But it's essentially an oscillation or a vibration, which is liable to be misunderstood because you hear a sound, you say, oh, that's just vibrations. But you have to get into the sound and realize that it's going around and around, and you're only able to call it a sound because it's going around much faster than you can count. If it could go around slow enough for you to count, you could go with it and experience this changing of initial impulse, reaction, consciousness, only at one point in the thing, and then the learning of the thing. Now, we do that as we begin in school and we grow up and so forth. We learn through life. So that lifetime is a cycle. Now, it's just that we refer to sound as frequency because we've outgrown that stage. We're now making, with our days and nights or our years or our lifetimes, what the Brahmin would recognize as a buzz.
How, with a single photon, would you create, say, a proton?
Well, when you say you create, I think I have to leave that out. The photon itself creates the proton and the antiproton by the process known as pair creation. I mean, I can't do it myself in the laboratory, but that's what I read in the books. That the photons of a certain rating, electron volt, it has to be a billion electron volt photon, which is 100 million times, more than 100 million times stronger than the photons that are coming from that light. More energy, that is to say. That kind of photon can create matter. A lower one can create electron and positron. Now, the electron and positron, or the proton and the antiproton, have these different qualities: plus and minus charge, half spin, mass, all these things that enter into making up the physical universe.
Now, if you had a single photon of a sufficiently high rotatory rate, a sufficiently high number of electron volts, then you should be able to create a universe.
That's right. I saw a paper by a Bulgarian years and years ago about if you had a photon 10 to the minus 80 centimeters in diameter, it would contain the energy of an entire universe.
Right.
And I wrote to Kip Thorne when he was first coming out the back about black holes.
Right.
Why isn't this black hole ultimately resolved into a photon or perhaps many photons? I wanted to know which. And he said he can't go there. His mathematics doesn't go that far.
Nor do his concepts.
Right. Well, that's it. It's pure uncertainty. So it couldn't possibly be conceptualized.
Well, I agree with Heinz von Foerster when he says that uncertainty is in the eye of the beholder.
Well, that would be Heisenberg's position. But see, I'm reversing that and saying uncertainty is my privilege.
Right.
When you said the machine, what kind of machine?
Non-trivial machine.
The non-trivial machine you can't figure out what it's going to do, but it makes the decision of what it's going to do.
Of course.
So one person's uncertainty is the other person's freedom.
Right. But the whole universe is determined. It's just too complicated for any observer.
No, it isn't determined at all. Parts of it are. So, in fact, well, I'm getting beyond my permesso. But just let me say one more sentence there.
No, you're not getting
because
beyond
you raised a whole new worm.
We Wheeler brought in wormholes in the universe, so that's permissible.
You were talking about your conversation with your God about this universe where
Right.
you can communicate and so on, and I wanted to state the problem that would arise with this universe, that you would need to create something to get in the way of this free, spontaneous interaction.
Oh, it's already there. My ignorance of other people's position.
No, but how did the first matter get stuck? How did these entities
Get going?
well get this stuff that's in the way? They put it there to play with.
Oh, of course. God would be bored otherwise.
So that's why the photon makes the matter.
Right. Okay.
And that starts the whole thing.
These are God's playmates.
Well, I suppose, I don't know, the different myths are slightly different.
What's interesting is that it might even be unexpected and uncertain to God.
Right.
That's Anselm's hypothesis, very interesting, that God himself is involved. Yeah.
Right.
When you are in control, you do something arbitrary. What makes a piece of art art?
Yeah, right. No, you wouldn't want to rest
with
repeat.
great control and learning, that's the masonry. It's positive, it's unexpected, it's significant, there is all. And if you get something like an extraordinarily small photon, you know these photons come in different sizes, like A, AA, and AAA, like A. And you get a very small one, well that's the one that can start it.
But it's also the one that has the least scope.
That's right. It comes around maybe once every, 10 to the minus 98.
Well, on the other hand,
The
God
point is what
can
you need-
create them at any time.
Huh?
God can create them anytime, anywhere.
I don't go that far myself. I mean, I just leave that to the other person. My brother used to ask me, well, these photons they weren't first cause, they came from the sun. That puzzled me for a while, and then I realized that when you talk about first cause, you don't mean that it's the only cause.
Right.
Suppose
It's a crowded universe.
like the, no. Maybe we haven't.
Well, omniscience and omnipresence and all that allows anything to happen anywhere. Yes.
Doctor, no one has more experience with the isolation thing like you than you have. Now, if you permit me to rephrase a bit of my earlier discussion at the beginning, but I would like to ask you to give me some concrete steps regarding the question whether once we are in any kind of altered state of consciousness, the experiences that we have, are they all projections, or what concrete proofs are there that something is coming from outside without LSD? If we get there, what would be the technique?
Use ketamine. Without LSD. No, let me put it this way. Let me say why ketamine is so useful to somebody like myself. With my medical training, I'm kind of a sucker for determinate biochemical and neurochemical events within my own brain, which start at a time t sub 0 and go to a time, say, t sub n, at which point I'm restored to the former state of consciousness that I had before that series of events took place. So it's where I can leave at time t0, and I can come back at time t sub n, and I know that this consciousness before and this consciousness after are sufficiently alike, and the reasoning powers are sufficiently alike, so that anything in between can be dealt with from that platform. You understand that? So that I do not have to, as it were, communicate with the particular being that went way out. That particular being I don't think I will ever understand in these two endpoint consciousness.
Is that the forerunner?
That is the forerunner. The forerunner goes so far out that the a grounded individual that talks to you cannot possibly understand where the forerunner has gone, but he can only give an approximation of it within the screen of words which I use to talk to you. Until you have your own experiences with this, you can't possibly know what I'm talking about. There's no way. So that if you use the classical yogic methods of meditation, samadhi, I go by Patanjali in Sutra 1, Book 4, in which he says, Janma, Usadi, Mantra, Tapa, Samadhi, Ja, Siddhaya. The perfection or the psychic powers are arrived at, number one, through genetic code, birth, janma, through drugs, light-containing herbs, usadi, mantra, word power, repetitions, incantations, and so on, tapas, religious austerities, such as the Catholic Church, starving yourself to death, living in a cave, whatever. Samadhi, changes in states of consciousness and realization of your essentially divine eternal self through your own mental, spiritual efforts within yourself in the isolation tent, for example. So that 250 to 450 BC, the old Grand Master had it all down in Sanskrit. And if you read his 196 sutras, you can fill all this out and realize what true yoga is. And I have not realized true yoga is yet, or I wouldn't be here talking to you.
This way. I thought
Anyway.
the question really was, where's the proof, the evidence of the Tao? Intrinsic or extrinsic is the question. How do you know?
There's no way of proving a change in state of consciousness except by experiencing it yourself. I gave up that many years ago. There are indications.
He's wondering if you can know that what you're getting is from without, right, or from within it. And my question is, in a sense, is there only really you, or is there only really the rest of the universe? And I don't
What is the interaction? How do I know if the interaction is really an interaction and not my own projection?
You're asking me to pretend that I'm disconnected from Ma Bell, Mother Earth, disconnected from the Echo computer, and disconnected from Bell's theorem throughout the universe. In this game, I will not play with you anymore. I used to be able to play that game, but I refuse now. There is no way of proving any of this except by direct experience and by direct experiment of your own. And once you're willing to talk to your own God and assume omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, eternally, and benevolence, it won't work. It hasn't for me up to this point. And it was through ketamine that I realized all this, ketamine and the isolation tank. And so those of you who have access to these particular means, I say use them. And those of you who don't, find out how you can get to use them. And someday there may be a Kmart in which you can buy ketamine.
Part of his question was
I think it's time for a break, don't you, Arthur?
let's take a break.
Arthur? It's 9:11. We've gone over it.
Yeah, we've
Should
gone
we
over
take a break?
it.
I feel ready for a break.
That's what we don't know.
Yeah, we don't have a zip. That's it.
She has a zip.
Okay.
Ruth Young said that nobody could hear in the back. Do you want to say that one more time?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
John, Ruth Young requests that you stand.
I heard that. She asked that.
Okay, are
And
you
also
going
that
to?
Arthur's stand.
Yeah. So, if you want to, we'll readjust the microphone. No, we'll just move it. Just move it. We'll just move it up.
You just raise it up.
Yeah, if that's what
If
they're
he
doing.
if they stand, we'll raise them.
For those of you who didn't hear in the back, if you would like a copy of tonight's tape, it's P.O. Box 71, Big Sur, 93920.
That address is on the bulletin board, right?
Is it out there? Okay, it's out in the entryway. Just specify the date so that they don't get confused.
It's the 17th of November, for those who don't know.
The year?
1982. AD. All right.
My question is about methodology.
Could you speak very loudly so the better ones in the
My
back?
question is about methodology, not only what you've accomplished, but maybe what other people are trying to do through scientific methodology, let's say. And the problem that I have is, one, that you've expressed it to in your talk tonight. One is using outside agents or stimulants to achieve alterations in consciousness and experience of consciousness. And then you have the other side, for example, say the yoga tradition, which doesn't necessarily include those things. Have you found a balance or a middle point there for yourself, or what do you do about that?
Well, could you raise this?
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
You've just enunciated the usual bullshit. And I tried to correct that earlier by quoting The Science of Yoga by Patanjali, Sutra 1, Book 4. Janma Usadi.
Right.
You've forgotten Usadi. Usadi in the ancient Sanskrit is light-containing herbs. Okay? So this is an acceptable yogic route
Within that way.
within Patanjali's way.
Right, but there are other paths that don't use.
There are other paths, but they're not exclusive. He says not only one of these, but all of these. So you are permitted in any way to use any route. And that's what I've been doing. Sometimes I use a route without any, and I dislike your terminology. I would prefer a more scientific terminology in which I say that I introduce certain special molecules within my substance which changes the relationship between the mental, the spiritual, and the physical level. So that there's a looseness of connection in which the spiritual level can leave the other levels, can leave the mental level, can leave the material level, and enter fully into communion, yogic communion, with the highest form of intelligence, which I call God, or a shorthand. So a true yoga can be realized over a limited period of time by the use of what I call a psychic catalyst, ketamine. And this substance is so different from anything else in the experience of man that it should not even be called a drug. It is conveniently called a drug so that it is conveniently available to hundreds of thousands of people without their knowing that they've been put into these states arbitrarily by modern medicine. This is an anesthetic used with very young people, especially with infants, for minor surgery, for brief surgical periods. It's also used with very old people because it's incredibly safe. It does not interfere with either circulation or respiration. And what it does, in modern medical parlance, is cause dissociation of the personality such that it is a dissociation anesthetic. meaning that there's analgesia for the body, meaning that the body can be cut and sewn without any morphine or anything else being added. So in a sense, it's magical, and it's highly spiritual. Now, what are the doses used in anesthesia, in major surgery? Up to 750 milligrams to 1,500 milligrams. Well, if you took that yourself, you'd be out of it for several hours, and you'd probably travel through many alternate realities, and you'd have conversations with God, but I doubt that you'd remember it. And most of the people put through this do not have the discipline to remember, to remain conscious all the way out and all the way back, and to carry the memory with them. And this is a very severe discipline. And if you want to accomplish that, I suggest you spend the next 3 years doing it. It'll take about that time. I spent 13 months in 1973 and 4 using this substance, and then crashed with PCP and was out of it for 5 days and nights. And then did not go back to it until 1981. And then suddenly I began to have opportunities to use it again under very carefully controlled conditions, and under conditions in which I could begin my own training with it in a much more severe way. And this is a severe training. It's not to be done lightly at all. It's not a recreational drug, and it's not a drug for any sort of physical recreation whatsoever. One ends up in a deep well of neutrality, in a state of very high indifference. A sort of a yogic wisdom takes over. And as I say, I have a committee that now supervises what I do with it. And on that committee are people like Einstein, Patanjali, and so on. And this is a very, very profound experience, which I respect. And I'm telling you of it now because I'm now allowed to do so. A month ago, I couldn't have told. Okay? I don't think you're asking the right question.
No, I think you're protecting the spouse walking inside, but people who are alone with them.
What is the license plate on the sod? But if the license plate is Tertiat, it's my daughter's and she's left.
The reason I asked the question, the thought behind the question was I was wondering whether hypnosis, self-hypnosis would work in that way.
Yes, that's Patanjali Samadhi, self-hypnosis. It's another term for the same thing, auto-hypnosis. And I call it self-metaprogramming in the tank. Yes, you can get quite far with that, and that's part of the discipline. You have to learn what you want to learn. You have to be able to specify what it is that you want, and be very careful about it because you're going to get it. Ketamine is the generic name. It's a ketonone, and it's a benzene ring with an amino acid kind of side chain, and then a very loose connection to a six-membered ring over here with no double bonds in it. So you have a very flexible play and oscillatory behavior on the part of the molecule. And if you want to look it up, it's in the PDR, and you look it up under Park Davis, and they patented it. And if you want to look up how to synthesize it, it's in the Merck Index, and the patents are given in that. Yes.
Could you say a little bit more about the mental? Are you saying in a altered state that is committed of wise beings who work with
They supervise my education. When I'm on ketamine, even at small levels, there's an intimate and detailed control of everything that I do and everything I think. And if I'm driving a car at the time, they guide the car and guide me in my hand in the way I drive. Now this is not on very deep levels. This is on a very, say, 50 milligrams an hour. Something of that sort. It isn't on 100 or 200 an hour. That's tank work. At that level.
Regulate your body processes so there's no...
Right. Everything. The way I think. They put me through an acupuncture course in the midline being. I don't know if you know much about the midline being. But this is your divine self. And it's in the midplane of the body. It's neither right nor left. It's both. And it's an infinitely thin slice down through the brain and the whole body this way, right down to the genitalia and anus, spinal cord, and so on. And it's neither right nor left. Now, if you talk to the acupuncturist about this, they can tell you that this is a generative pad. And when I'm injecting ketamine, I'm expected to inject along these particular meridians and other meridians. So there's an acupuncturist on the committee also.
Your passion-based experience providing and it's the way you discuss it, the intention
You know the difference. I know, but you know the difference between Larry and myself. I spent the early years in the Virgin Islands using LSD in an isolation tank with 3 dolphins. And I didn't know anything about what was happening at either Newton or at Millbrook. And it was only in subsequent years that I learned what sort of a public display was going on in those areas. And I was really startled to find that my experience was not paralleled by Leary and his crew. Now, since then, I've gotten to know Metzner and Ramdas very well, and I appreciate where they've come from and where they are today. And I like it very much. It's only in the last year that I've gotten to know Tim, and I appreciate where he is at the present time. And he is yet to use ketamine effectively. And I don't think any of the others are yet.
Yeah, just to learn it, right, and also the more things have the most experience with it. And so other people have to learn.
Right.
But the other thing that there's another analogy that you could have denigrated, you know,
No, I didn't mean to. No, I said my training included that.
Okay, include that. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of exchanging your platitudes. I mean, see, it's all relative. So you have this stuff.
I'm sorry, but behind all of this, it's absolutely not relative.
What's ahead that bothers me? There are hundreds of thousands of substances out there, and every one of them gives you a paranormal experience. Take it right now.
Nonsense.
Every one of them nonsense. No,
I say nonsense.
But I don't think that's true. Take any quality and get ingested, you induce epiphany and experience. They're all pains. Your isolation tank experience.
How much experience have you had with the indole series, running from mescaline to amphetamine? How much experience have you had with the LSD series?
Ingesting my body?
Yes.
Very much.
Okay, then don't sound off about these substances and
No,
their
that's
epiphany.
old arguments.
Right.
I can't talk about nuclear bombs and nuclear foods and cosmos and cosmos.
But I can talk with authority about any of these
Talk
substances.
about authority too. Our authority, who decides what the authority is?
Experience.
Okay.
Consensus here.
Okay. Experiment, experience.
You think you have to put it on the wall and that's your authority.
Yes. You're so right. Yes.
We can do an architect talk together. That was quite
Right.
interesting.
Someone asked me
something that I wanted to ask you, but you totally got so far ahead of me that I could barely ask it. Sorry. According to my theory, I would have deduced that the dolphins are a higher order of being than we are. And so I wanted to ask you more about that.
I agree. I think they're less contaminated. The sea somehow is a smoother spiritual existence than the land. And that the experience of gravity and falling, and the necessity of
that would be accommodated, if I may say so, in my theory, because the lower levels you are dealing with matter, and when you graduate from that, I didn't know what you did. You float in the ether or something. But the dolphins seem to fulfill the prescription precisely because they have less variety. They don't have a lot of the adjectives to take care of.
Right. They don't have hands to
Right.
worry about.
Well, this is our distinction from the animals, because the animals are exploring a variety of tools, and we are a generalization of the animals, and we make our own tools. But I would think the dolphins are a step ahead, where they make their own music, as it were, instead of tools.
And they make their own meditation.
Right.
Very advanced.
And then the other question I wanted to ask you was, had you had a psychic communicate, or had you tried having a psychic communicate with the dolphins? But now you've got them to talk English, so that doesn't seem necessary. But tell us more about that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, the psychic that works with me on this, Teresa Vance, I'm sorry she's not here because she has very direct information about psychic communication, not only with dolphins, but with orca, or Sinus orca, so-called killer whales, and with the larger whales. And she brings me these messages every so often, which I found are, amazingly accurate. She makes predictions and they happen, so that one can't ignore this at all on this particular level. As I've said in the past, I wrote, I think it was in Mind of the Dolphin, I wrote that when ESP becomes as reliable as the Bell telephone system, then I'll use it. Well, it has become that way. And so now I'm attempting to use it.
Then you better become a dolphin.
No, I think humans can do it. I think we can do it. And with proper training, we can all do it.
Well, that would be an issue that I don't want to waste time on it, but I
Right.
state my position.
Sure.
I prefer to be in the mess and enjoy working through it. I don't feel that I've lost, I could get back upstairs, but then I'd want to come down into the mess again.
Well, I think that you can stay in the mess and still do ESP and find it useful. Just like the telephone.
Right, but your
Like the
ideal universe where you talk to your God would have no obstructions in it.
No, I don't want to stay in that one. I'd rather stay in the mess.
You said everyone was going to communicate with everyone else.
Yeah, but not at that level. On the level that you and I are communicating, I think we can use ESP to gossip.
Well, I don't know what I'm using ESP, but
You will pretty soon.
well, we can always resort to no. I mean, you're trying to communicate, the other one says, is it this? And I say, no. Sure. That's what the universe does to inventors.
Yeah.
You say, I want to make a helicopter.
Oh,
and
you
it
don't
says
have
no.
to. You don't have to reveal all of what you're thinking on the ESP channels at all. You choose the message just the way you do on a telephone. You don't reveal your whole mind. That would be really fake.
Yeah, well, wait a second. We've got to do this agreement between authorities because Joan Grant, the one who wrote Winged
Right.
Pharaoh, said that most people come down to high because their thoughts are being read by everyone else on that plateau, and they don't like it, so they come down high.
Oh, well, that's another level. I'm not interested in that one either. Where everybody shares every thought, that's just dull. I agree. That's the cosmic gameplay.
Well, I don't see how you can necessarily condemn a level. Each thing has
I'm
its
not
own.
condemning it, I'm just saying I prefer to be here.
Right.
That's all.
Okay.
It's a personal preference.
Right.
What's the training you see as a training for the ESP channel opening effort?
Well, it's B.F. Skinner. Positive negative reinforcement. I prefer, you know what the BF stands for in Skinner? If it's positive reinforcement, it's the beautiful father. And if it's the bad father if it's negative reinforcement.
There it is, Ed.
So you reward one another for an exchange of thoughts, and you know that the other person receiving it, that they're receiving it unconsciously. And so you insist that they get it into their consciousness. So you do various things that are in tune with what you're telling them you're doing and what they're doing. And so you use a behavioral method. Yes, Skinner. Beautiful father.
Father and bad father. Do you share an image of reincarnation? You mentioned reincarnation, and you also mentioned reincarnation. Do you have a notion that they're in the same world? Or
I think we do.
Sure. Why not? It's a good out.
Didn't we say something, though? I mean, we
yes,
agreed.
I would like you to say something, yes.
No.
Well, that table describes the monad as going through these realms. In other words, as an animal, as a vegetable, as a chemical, and so on,
Right.
which were necessary to our evolution as persons. I mean, you can't be a person until we've succeeded in being an animal, and so on down the line. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, completely. There's stages of evolution in each individual soul.
Right. Well, the other sticking point is people ask, well, how do you prove evolution? How do you prove reincarnation, the pre-existing soul, or the immortality? And then I turn around. It's what is it that can be destroyed? And if you think about it a little bit, the only thing that can be destroyed is something that's constructed. Like a house that's been built, you can destroy it. But the self isn't constructed. The self is unitary stuff, whatever it is. And nothing can happen to it, destroy it. All that can happen to it would increase its experience.
So it goes on as there's an individuality about the whole of soul.
That's
there's
a
an
deep
individuality
problem
about
of the individuality. But I always tell that joke about the student who went to the guru and said, "Master, what is the nature of the self?" And the guru said, "What would you be doing with a self?" So you carry it around like a suitcase or a wheelbarrow.
Last night was a very interesting number. November 16, 1974, the ROC telescope was used to send a message at this moment somewhere heading toward M13, 26,000 light south. And that was preceded directly from some of your efforts on the 60 panel of what they call satellite television. What are your thoughts on communicating with others, either by radio or other?
Well, if you use Einstein limited communication means, you're going to consume light years. If you use Bell theorem, non-local reality means, it happens all the time. What's going on in this room is known throughout the universe. And it's only what I consider the integration of mind within my material being is Einstein limited. In other words, signals within my material matter are Einstein limits. Travel only at the maximum velocity near that of light, and some neuronal processes take a lot longer than that. So the integration time for something that happens to me, say, right this instant, that some ET throws at me from a distance, a la Doris Lessing, may take several weeks for me to realize happened to me tonight. And I may not be me tonight. I may be an ET talking to you from some other planet. You see? See the kind of dilemma this leaves you in? Non-local reality is non-local reality. And consciousness is everywhere. I'm just a node in a kind of a universal network.
Well, the point of it is that there are also stories right here in Berkeley of people acting as channels for something like that. And I just wonder what you talk to them.
I just told you. I'm just another one of them.
He knows nothing.
What was in the message that they sent in November 74?
Well, it was Dr. Lilly was now he was on the panel discussing the first testimony. Frankly, that's really how well it's around.
Well, luckily I wasn't on the panel. I was just representing the Dolphins who were trying to get on the... But instead they had sent the humpback whale music on a record on that thing that NASA put out.
Well, that's better than the high to the anti-decimal.
Right. As if intelligent. Yes. Well, I don't know what you mean by personal relationships. I sort of almost at times mutilate my body and various austere things that they make me do. And personal in that sense, yes, but universal in the sense that I'm being taught something and they are being taught something in a feedback system. I used to think they're omniscient, but they're not. They're learning by experiments that I'm doing at their behest. So I'm their guinea pig in a sense. Oh yeah, I gave up from 74 to 81. I refused to do anything for a long time there. Even though I knew they were still busy and setting me up again. They let me know in unequivocal terms when they're setting me up. And then every so often they let me rest. Oh, sure. For instance, I've had a cold for about 2 weeks, and I couldn't talk for about a week because I refused to do some things they wanted me to do. I can retreat into illness at any point. And I will not allow miracles of healing. Any healers that get anywhere near me, I won't cooperate. Yes.
Yes, I heard something somewhere about a theory about two forms of supreme emanative energy in the galaxy, two godlike forms, one being more organic and the other related more to artificial intelligence or computer type consciousness. Did you entertain that theory one time, or how do you feel about it?
That's in the scientists. That was the SSE, solid state energy, versus the water-based life form. No, there's no rivalry.
No,
There's symbiosis.
But did you feel there's sort of two forms in a sense?
Well, there's the solid state energy of Mother Earth that creates the waterborne ones. But actually, if you look at the model of Earth, we're in a very, very thin layer around a huge ball. I mean, there's so much more to Earth than us. It's incredible.
Another thing is just the recognition of the M field recently, Sheldrake and some other people's work. I'm rather excited about the fact that that's being consciously at least flagged around and raised around for people to think about.
Right.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, that's the whole soul and filling it with matter and the evolution of that. I mean, it's all very familiar. As soon as I began to read what they were saying, it's familiar.
I think the familiarity that might undermine some of the real strong questions that certain people had by sort of representing answers in a way.
Well, once you begin to discover that you can't discover anything, then it's fine.